intro, and jumping right into the poker hands, we pick up ace-9 offsuit in the cutoff. Ends up folding around to me, and I raise it up to $15. Pretty standard stuff here, pretty standard. Small blind folds, big blind puts in the call. He likes to play a little bit of defense, so we're going to go heads up here to a flop. And the flop gives us top pair. With a not-so-great kicker, we see 5 of hearts, ace of spades, 7 of diamonds. Big blind starts things off with a check, and I go ahead and put in a continuation bet here, and he snap folds and says he doesn't want any part of it, and we end up taking this small first pot down to start off the session. About 15 minutes goes by before we find ourselves in another standard spot. This time we've got pocket 8s in the cutoff, and after it folds around to me, I go ahead and raise it up. I make it 15 to go. And as is standard in these games, we end up getting multiple callers. We end up getting a few callers here. We see the button put in the call, the small blind puts in the call, and the big blind comes along for the ride as well. 4 ways to a flop, and we see the ace of clubs, 3 of clubs, 8 of diamonds. Now that is a beautiful sight in a multi-way pot, flopping middle set. Small blind checks, big blind checks, and I think it is time to fire a continuation bet here and start to build a pot. I settle on a half pot size bet of $35. Button quickly folds. Small blind does not fold, and he does not call. He goes for the old check raise here in this spot. That is right, we are going to get a little bit of action here with our flopped middle set. He announces a raise to 100. Big blind quickly gets out of there, and the action is back on me. Now it's a question of, do I want to call here and keep ranges wide, or do I want to just go ahead and shovel money into this pot? We've only got 100 big blind starting stack here, so if I raise to, say, 250 or 300, it's basically an all-in. So, with that in mind, I just go all in and try to get it all in the middle, and he quickly snap calls here. So, I think we have set versus set, but then he jokingly asks chop chop before the cards are even turned over, which means he has ace-king, and he thinks I might have ace-king, but I let him know I have a set. He sighs and taps the table and ends up folding his cards face up and does show ace-king offsuit. So we end up taking this one down, starting off the session strong, stacking our opponent with set versus top pair, top kicker. Let's see if we can continue to run it up. Let's see if we can't have a monster session this time around, guys. What do you say? What do you say to having a huge, huge session? Really have time to get our chips all stacked up and situated before picking up another playable hand. This time it is pocket 4s and we are in the cutoff. We love playing from the cutoff. It's like playing from the button, except it's not the button. Anyway, we see a raise from the hijack to 15. I put in the call and everyone else folds. So we're going to end up going heads up here to a flop, which comes down jack 10 4, all diamonds. The prospects of having a monster session are looking pretty strong here, guys. Pretty strong. Hijack decides to start things off with a check, and I go ahead and check back, and we see the 6 of spades on the turn, which is a blank, and now the hijack decides to take the betting lead again with a delayed continuation bet of $25. Folding is certainly out of the question here, so my options are either to raise or call. Raising will get value from all of his pairs plus draws and 2 pair type hands, and calling will keep ranges wide. I've played with this player a fair amount. I know that he's capable of continuing to put money in the pot when he senses weakness, so with that in mind, I just call and we see the 8 of spades on the river. Now, while the 8 of spades does make the board more connected, it's not another diamond, so it shouldn't slow the hijack down, and sure enough, he fires out a bet of $50. Now I think I have a spot where I have to put in the mandatory raise here. As I mentioned earlier, we can get value from all of his top pair hands, all of his 2 pair hands. There's a lot here that we could potentially get value from, so I go with the sizing of 4x. I announce $200. Hijack looks a bit disgusted when I put in the raise, but he doesn't fold immediately. I'm wanting a call here, but he does let his cards go pretty quick, and we don't get any additional value with our set of 4s. But we are on the right path here. We are on the path upward. We keep picking up pocket pairs, and this time it's a premium pocket pair. We've got the ladies under the gun +1 or middle position, whatever you want to call it. I raise it to 15. That's my usual 3x pre-flop sizing. We see a player in the low jack put in the call. We see a player in the hijack call. Cutoff folds, button folds, but the small blind puts in the call and the big blind gets out of there. So we're going to go 4 ways to a flop. And we see a pretty connected board of Jack 8-7 Rainbow. When it checks to me, I think I can continue to fire here for value. I can obviously get called by a lot of draws, a lot of Jack X hands here, so I go ahead and fire a continuation bet of $35. Low Jack puts in the call, and I think he's going to have a lot of Jack X hands here when he calls, and now it's over to the hijack, who announces a raise of $120. When hijack raises here, this looks incredibly strong into multiple opponents. Now, one could argue that he could be doing this with some bluffs because of the fact that it does look so strong. His bluffs are likely to get through, but my experience with most players at these low stakes is that they will call flops too often with the weak portion of their range, and they'll raise too frequently with the strong portion of their range, which basically means they don't have enough bluffs in spots like this. The hijack is basically saying he has a flopped set or a flopped straight or maybe two pair here, although two pair seems a little unlikely unless he has a hand like Jack 8 suited. And our ladies aren't doing too well up against that exact range. So sure, he could be doing this with some straight draws that have some equity on this flop, but I just don't see players doing that too often. Plus, would he really bluff raise here into multiple opponents left to act behind? I think the answer is no. Based on that observation, I decide to make an exploitative play here, and I just let my ladies go. I go ahead and fold. I think in certain games versus certain players, the standard play is going to be to call here, but I think at these stakes against these players, I think folding is fine. Let me know what you think in the comments below. One of the ladies came back into our life, and this time she brought a suitor, the ace of hearts. We have the parking lot hand, ace-queen offsuit. We are in early position under the gun, and I raise it up to 15. Folds around to the player in the hijack, who goes into the tank for a bit here. It looks like he's thinking about making a move. Looks like he's thinking about a potential 3-bet here. But then the dealer just reminds him that it's his turn and he folds. So now it's on the cutoff, and she goes ahead and puts in the call. The button decides that she's going to go ahead and tag along, and she puts in the call. And both blinds get out of the way. So we're going to go 3 ways here to a flop. Flop comes down, king of diamonds, 10 of diamonds, 3 of clubs, giving us 1 overcard and a gut shot straight draw. Being out of position and first to act, I go ahead and start things off with a check. The cutoff decides check is good, and the button, who is a fun lady from somewhere it sounds like over in Europe, who has been drinking a little bit, she decides to stab here for $20. The button had been playing fairly face up the entire session, and she seems to be a bit new to the game. She also thought she was sitting at a 1-3 table when she sat down, and then she decided to stay when she found out it was 2-5. So I don't think she's too comfortable with the stakes. I don't like calling here, and I don't want to fold, so that only leaves one option, the old check raise. I bump it up to 65, cutoff quickly exits the pot, and the button follows suit pretty quickly as well, although she's staring me down the entire time she folds, so I don't think she was too happy about it, but we get our bluff through. Well, this is one hand I wish I could take back. Let's go ahead and get into it. We look down at 2 black jacks, and we see a limp from both the under the gun and the under the gun +1 player. We need to punish these limpers. I go ahead and raise it up. I make it 25 to go from the hijack. Player in the cutoff decides to go ahead and put in the call. The button decides to fold. Small blind decides he's going to put in a call. Big blind decides to fold. Under the gun player who limped folds, and the under the gun +1 player who limped goes ahead and puts in the call. So we're going to go multi-way here to a monotone flop. Not only is it a monotone flop, it's a fairly connected flop. We see all low cards, 8, 7, 5, all clubs, and we have the jack of clubs. Small blind starts things off with a check, and the player who limp called under the gun +1 decides to check as well. I go ahead and check. I think checking here is probably the best play, being stuck in between a bunch of opponents. The hijack, though, he throws out a bet of $50. Now the action is over to the small blind, who pretty quickly decides to just call $50 here. And when he calls, I'm thinking he's going to have some overs with either the ace of clubs or the king of clubs in his range. And when it's over to the under the gun +1 player, I'm thinking he's either going to be folding or maybe even re-raising, but then he just decides to go ahead and stick in the call. So I think everybody here is on a draw, and we probably have the best hand. So I think I could just go ahead and call and keep ranges wide here, and that's what I end up doing. I decide to just go ahead and put in the $50, and we're going to go multi-way here to a turn. Small blind checks for a second time, and the under the gun +1 player checks for a second time, and now the action is on me. And I think I could go for a bet here, but I called on the flop to keep ranges wide, and if the hijack wants to keep firing, I think I'm going to give him that option to do so. So I go ahead and check here for a second time as well. But the hijack does not take the bait. He quickly checks back, and we're going to go to a river, which is a board pairing 4 of spades. Now the action is on the small blind, who decides that he's going to lead out, and lead out rather large here on this river. He puts out a bet of $200. The under the gun +1 player folds pretty quickly, and the action is on me. And of course, hindsight being 20/20, as I look back on this hand, I think this is a clear fold in this spot. Small blind's not going to be taking this line with a worse 2-pair hand. He's not going to be doing this with a hand, say, like pocket 10s or pocket 9s. He's not going to be doing this with 8-7 suited. I think all those hands would just check here or continue to check on the river. So I don't think he's going to have a lot of bluffs here. I don't think he's going to do this with a lot of his ace-high hands that contain a club. In the moment, I just got caught up about thinking I'm folding too frequently on rivers and blah, 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 blah. It's just a fold, and of course, when the answer is obvious, I go with the wrong answer, and I put in the call, and we get shown the bad news when he turns over the flopped flush with ace-3 of clubs. These are the types of spots in the past where I would always fold river and then feel like a nit, but the reality is players just are always showing up with the goods. They always have it in these spots, especially in multi-way pots, where is he really going to be trying to bluff 3 or 4 opponents? No, the answer is no, and I could have saved myself 40 big blinds by just folding the river, but instead I cost myself here, and I punished myself by making a really, really poor call in this spot. A little tilted after making a bad call on the previous hand. I'm not in a folding mood, and I'm trying to win some of the money back when I pick up ace-jack offsuit in the cutoff. Folds around to me, and I go ahead and raise it up to 15, and the big blind decides to go ahead and put in the defend here and puts in the call. So we're going to go heads up here to a flop in position, a flop of queen 3-6 with 2 diamonds. We flop a whole lot of nothing, so we are going to have to turn up the pressure here if we want to win this pot. The big blind checks, and she's been known to be quite sticky with any pair or any draws. So with that in mind, I fire a half pot size continuation bet of 15, expecting her to call almost always, and she does exactly that. Off to a turn, which is the king of hearts, brings in a backdoor flush draw, and it brings in some backdoor straight draws, which we now have, as any non-heart 10 would give us the nuts. We have a low equity draw and an opponent who likes to call flop, call turn, and fold lots of rivers when she misses, so I think the play here is to fire out a medium to pot size bet here, with plans to be devious on any river that is not a diamond. I announce a pot size bet of 60, and the big blind thinks for a bit. She doesn't look super happy, but she does go ahead and put in the call. Off to a river we go, and it is the 4 of spades, which is pretty much a complete brick in this spot. When the big blind checks for a 3rd time, this is a spot in the past where I would have checked back a lot. But losing to any of her pocket pairs here like 9s or 7s or even pocket 10s would be a shame in this spot. Plus, she's just going to have so many missed draws. I announce an overbet of $210, and she snap folds, and we get another bluff through here. I'm starting to think that there's more to this whole bluffing thing than I might have previously recognized. We pick up ace-jack again. This time it's the suited variety, ace-jack of diamonds, and we are in position on the button. Folds around to the hijack, who puts in a raise to 20. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is a hand we want to 3-bet in position pre-flop. However, the player in the hijack had been playing pretty snug, and I think ace-jack of diamonds in this position plays better as a call. So that's what I do. I put in the call, the small blind folds, and the big blind tags along and puts in the call as well. So 3 ways to a flop of ace, 8, 6 with 2 clubs. Big blind starts things off with a check, and the original raiser in the hijack checks as well, and I think my hand is going to want to bet here to get value from flush draws and any worse ace-x hands. I put in a bet of $35, a little bit on the larger side. Big blind's not scared though. He calls and the hijack folds. The turn is the 8 of spades, pairing the board. The front door flush draw misses, so when big blind checks for a 2nd time, I think the play here is to bet small. However, I end up checking back for a little bit of pot control, plus I think this particular villain type is capable of bluffing rivers when he misses his draws. River is the 4 of hearts, which does bring in a straight, but not something I'm too concerned about in this spot. Big blind fires out for roughly 2/3 pot size bet, and I snap call here thinking he is just full of it. He is not full of it though. He seems very confident when he turns over ace-10 offsuit. That is no good, sir. We've got you out-kicked. We've got you pipped by 1. We win this pot with our ace-jack of diamonds. Nothing too crazy here, but it is a hand that I played, so I thought I would include it in the vlog. We've got 8-7 of diamonds in the under the gun +1 spot. I make it 15. Goes to the low jack who puts in the call, and the small blind decides to put in the call as well. So we're going to end up going 3 ways here to a flop with our little suited connector. And unfortunately, the flop is a swing and a miss for us. We don't pick up any equity. We've got some backdoor straight draw possibilities, but that's being pretty optimistic when we see deuce of clubs, ace of spades, 5 of clubs. Small blind starts things off with a check, and I think about representing the ace here, but I think I just go ahead and check. It makes more sense in this spot, sandwiched in between 2 opponents. Low jack decides to represent the ace, and he bets 20. Small blind pretty quickly calls 20, and I go ahead and exit here with my 8 high. I know what you're thinking. Really exciting stuff here. Really riveting. Some might say it's riveting. Some might say that. All right, enough with the boring standard stuff. This time we've got a much more exciting spot. We pick up the Cowboys on the button. Ends up folding around to me, and I go ahead and raise it up. I make it my standard 15 to go. Small blind quickly exits the pot, and the big blind decides he's going to go ahead and defend, and he puts in the call. So we're going to go heads up here in position with a premium pocket pair. Flop comes down 5-4 deuce with 2 diamonds. Not the best flop in the world for our pocket king. So when big blind checks, I think this is going to connect a lot more with his range than my pre-flop raising range. So I fire out a little bit of a larger sizing of 20. Big blind pretty quickly calls, and we go off to a turn, which is the 3 of diamonds. That basically completes every draw under the sun, so when big blind checks for a second time, I exercise some pot control here and check back, and we go to the river, which is the jack of clubs. Now is where things get interesting. The big blind decides he's going to bet, and he bets big. He decides to go with an overbet, about 2x size of the pot. He makes it 150 to go. Once again, I think this is a spot on the river where we can probably just laugh out loud and fold. I mean, what bluffs is big blind really repping here? I think the answer to that is just about 0 bluffs. Unfortunately, I end up getting married to my hand, which is a cardinal sin in this game, and we end up putting in the call. We quickly get shown the bad news when he turns over ace-7 of diamonds for the nut flush. They always have it. The last interesting hand of this session ends up being the exact same hand we had in the previous hand. The same exact Cowboys, the king of hearts, king of diamonds, except this time we're in the big blind. The $10 under the gun straddle is on, and we see a raise from a player who's in middle position. He makes it 25 to go. The action ends up folding around to me, and now a 3-bet is in order. I just have to decide what size do I want to go with here. I settle on $100 as being the best size here, although I think I could have went a little bit larger, considering the $10 straddle is on and he raised the 25. I think I could go 125 or even 150 here. Straddler gets out of the way, and it's back over to the player in the middle position, who quickly flicks in a $100 chip. So we're going to go heads up to a flop here, which comes down at 10-7-6 rainbow. When a middle position player just calls here pre-flop, I think he's going to have a lot of pocket pairs and a lot of like suited Broadway cards in his range. So I think my exact hand wants to bet against that range. We can get value from hands like pocket jacks or even ace king or ace queen that wants to peel and see a turn. So I down bet, I announce a bet of $65, and he pretty quickly snap folds and flashes ace king offsuit, sending his cards into the muck. So he did have one of those types of hands, but unfortunately we just couldn't get any value there. We played for about another hour and 30 minutes after this, but we didn't get into any interesting spots. So this is going to be the last hand for the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed the hands. If you did, please consider hitting the like and subscribe. Helps me out a ton, and I appreciate all of your support. All right, guys, that's going to do it for episode 54 of the poker vlog. I hope you guys enjoyed the hands. I hope you enjoyed the episode. We were in the game for 500, and we ended up cashing out for 738 for a profit of $238. I will put the totals up here as I usually do. And yeah, we gave some back. We were at one point, we were up about $700, and we gave quite a bit back in some spots where I probably could have folded on the river. But unfortunately, I did make the call, and we were wrong. And that's how it works in poker sometimes. You go with your reads, and sometimes they're wrong. So you just got to live with the results. So if you liked the episode, please do all the YouTube stuff up here. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And I will see you in the next episode. Take care.